Perfect. Good, beautiful sunny morning, Peter. How's
How's
it
it
going?
go? All good. All good. A little
Beautiful.
bit chilly here, but wrapped up nicely and ready to chat.
Stunning. Cool. I've got the sun coming in from the one side. You got two. So here we go. Right, guys. This is our first podcast, Peter and me together. And as we unfold and grow and organically let it go, we do, however, have certain things and a focused intention in place. And our umbrella for what we're going to be doing and are doing right now is called radical self-responsibility. It's all encompassing. And this umbrella, we can visualize it as having like spokes that opens the umbrella. So if that's the umbrella's name, radical self-responsibility, we're going to flesh it out in many kinds of spokes. And I'll let Peter converse here and come in and talk about the umbrella, the top, what it looks like, and then we'll start to play with the spokes as we go into this chat, this introduction to what we're going to be doing and addressing.
Brilliant. I love that analogy of the umbrella and its many spokes. So I think the thing that holds the spokes together at the top is understanding of the balancing the sacred masculine and the sacred feminine, wisdom and compassion. And that the two of those things, wisdom and compassion being the intellectual and the emotional, that the balance of those two things produce what's called right action or the middle path, or the divine child in the world. And so that being how we express ourselves physically in the world. And so those are the three things that will hold all the spokes together, I think. And those spokes are different things like natural law, sovereignty, the understanding of law versus legal, dealing with abandonment issues, what is the sacred masculine and feminine, what is our physiology, because I think it's really important, you know, if we're going to know ourselves as instructed by the oracle at Delphi, know thyself, that if we're going to do that, we have to understand the physiology of our bodies because it's so much is interconnected with how we think and then how we act in the world. So those are the spokes for me. I know that you have other spokes that are important for you or that you focus on, and that actually you've quite balanced and you're already doing like right action stuff. So maybe you want to talk about those things a bit.
Yes. Yeah, just quickly back to the umbrella, exactly that. Also called love. Everything is love, you know, and we're talking big love, romantic love. Yeah, part of it can be another way we express it. Absolutely beautiful. But love is it. And how does love express in this world? And how do we align with it? And what does that mean? It's not just choosing love, it's doing love, thinking love, all of the above. Yes. And there is that feminine and there is that masculine, the action one, and then what goes with that, that informs that action and balances right so that action is right and not wrong, because there is a very specific right and wrong, which we've all lost. So my spokes that I specifically focus on and do in my life and have always been interested in is education, and then food sovereignty, food, energy, shelter, financial alternative sovereignty. So all of that kind of stuff, that the nitty gritty of my everyday chopping wood, carrying water, and how to do that and desystematize and make that into a radically self-responsible way, not handing over any responsibility for that to any other, so that I can be free-willed and in my freedom see how that works. And that is, yeah, that has been my journey, also my lifetime journey in so many ways. Yeah.
Okay, brilliant. So where we're going to start with with radical self-responsibility, have we an idea?
Yeah. So I feel like I just want to start jumping in. For me, I think both of us can talk about right here, right now. What is around me in this material world? And then how is where I'm plugged into, which is primary, which we can call spirit, God, nature, love, all of these beautiful things, consciousness, universe, etc., great spirit, and so on. How we plugged into that, and how that does inform our life, and then self-love will come into that. So I'm just going to talk very briefly. So my context and setting physically where I'm at is that I live every day off grid. Okay, off grid water, off grid energy, mostly actually off grid monetary system. I barter and trade mostly, and I'll speak more specifics as that go. And this is probably a good time to go into specifics. And I feel, and also in terms of knowledge as power, I like to do a lot of investigating and learning and unlearning, okay, and de-schooling of myself mostly. And that's how I love myself. Sometimes it feels like I hate myself when I do that because it's not comfortable, but that is the whole point of love. It is tough. It is tough, and I have to practice what I preach, and then I do the same around me. So I live that life. I'm a food forester, love it. I love to create food situations where it can be a sovereign and I have a choice, and I always prefer not shopping outside of where I live. Unless I go to another oak, another person, also doing it with love and care, and then I know where my food, what I put into my body, is what I would like to know where that is come from, and going to source. I like source. Where does it come from? When I spend money, good old fiat, what do I spend it on? And where does that money go? Which parts do what? Most of the time it's feeding the good old military industrial complex, which I'm trying so hard to be free from, and to help others to see how they can free themselves from, so that we can actually be free beings and walk with love and not conditioning, which is a fresh choice every moment. Yeah. So that, and the same then with the school that I've created or co-created, with free folk, teaching natural law and living it, and also at levels. Everybody has their own place where they're coming from. So throwing the net wide so that we can each in our own way, and in a fun way. Absolutely. It is a fun way. That we can all learn it in our own way and in our own time, but that the choices are there, that we can choose. It's not just one way, which we've all been conditioned to as well, So those are the two aspects that I love working with, all ages, and constantly having to check in with myself. How am I actually doing that? Am I walking my talk, and how integrous and authentic am I in each path of that, in a way, taking the canvas of my life and taking the frame away, and saying how that spills over into what I'm actually doing when I'm out of my studio and away from my easel, just making my imaginative, what is it that I would really like to see in this world, the most beautiful utopian picture that I know is real, and why don't I see it around me? And how can I do it, affecting that change in me and then in those around me? Yeah.
Brilliant. So if I look at sort of my journey with attempting to get to this right action place that you find yourself quite easily, actually, I know it's been hard won. And I know that it's taken a lot of like stickability and all of that to create what you've created for yourself, which is beautiful, and for you to live your talk. And my journey kind of went a different way, because I kind of tried to go too fast, really. And I ended up without sort of a proper container for myself because of my childhood stuff, and so ended up with all that conditioning coming down too fast because I am an extremist and I do try to do everything at once. So
from one to another. Yeah.
yeah. So and then it's been a journey of self-investigation of what is it that I can't actually manage to manifest, what I can so clearly see in my mind, and I can't actually manifest it in my life. And so I've had to get into this self-conversation, and this comes to the first law, natural law, which is the law of mentalism, that everything starts with thought, and actually get into the conversation that goes on in my mind that stops me from actually being able to like take action in the world, so that's the work that I'm doing with people, is how to get into that conversation in my mind that's actually an argument between a whole bunch of younger experiences of myself, so that nobody actually ever comes to any kind of agreement, because there's no real parent there. There's a bunch of inner children, and becoming my own inner parent, so that I can actually quieten it all down, and now start to take action in my life and find that action is supported, as we learned in the matchstick game, universe applauds action, not thought. And finally being able to actually take the actions that are so like I've been very intellectual in my life, and I can see the big picture, but I'm paralyzed by it because to a large degree, up until very recently, I've been an adult child, really. Pulled hither and thither by all these unconscious patterns from my childhood that I don't even really understand. So the process has been making those patterns conscious, so that I can do something about just being pulled around by it, making the patterns conscious, getting into that conversation in my mind, so that I'm not my own worst enemy and self-sabotage all the way along the line, because I've got a whole bunch of really scared, frightened, abandoned, lonely children trying to keep themselves safe, and that comes into this thing of where do we act from love or from fear, and how easily do we get pushed into fear when we haven't processed these inner children, and how the conversation in our minds really can either come from love or fear, depending on who's actually triggered, which part of me is pitched up to deal with this situation, so through doing that work, and that's why now I'm starting this, well, I did one last year, the women's group, and now the group on balancing the sacred masculine and feminine, and basically that is to do this work of being able to take right action.
And then right action and do this work, and the inner work and then the outer work, it is taking radically responsibility for oneself. And then knowing that and going in there, knowing that we are radically responsible for each other as well,
Absolutely.
It's very important.
Yeah, and that's the thing, is we talk about radical self-responsibility, but until very recently, and in fact still sometimes, I'm an emotional child, and most people are. That's what I've started to discover, is that most people are being run by their inner children, and becoming an adult is dropping all of those fears, acknowledging them first, because you can't just push them to one side. That's the one of the things that I really battle with the love and light. I'll call them the love and light brigade, but is actually there is a lot of fear, there is a lot of conditioning, and there is a lot of programming, and if we don't look at how that programming is keeping us as children, unable to step into radical self-responsibility in our lives and actually look at the abandonment issues, feel the sadness, feel the abandonment, feel the loneliness. If we don't do those things and pretend that that stuff doesn't exist, because there's a manager part that's really very good at pretending it doesn't exist and everything's fine, you know, if we don't work with those parts and look at that stuff and acknowledge it and make it a part of our experience and bring it with us, and we're pretending it doesn't exist, it's like a Gruffalo, you know, it's behind us, we can't see it, it's projecting this huge shadow onto the wall, and really it's a tiny little mouse that we can make friends with so easily, you know, without doing that work, which is why every spiritual tradition says you have to start with yourself, know thyself, you know, it's this, what are all the parts of me? Where are the things? Is it my 12-year-old who's saying fuck you at the moment, you know, or is it the 16-year-old? What it's a real conversation that goes on in each of us.
Absolutely. Yeah, definitely. And so exactly that, to take responsibility for all those aspects and look them right in the eyeball, you know. A lot of us are very into this whole Abraham kind of vibe, that old New Agey law of attraction vibe. Only think of the good, only think good thoughts, and good will come to me. But we are tripped up all the time but what we are pretending not to see or wouldn't like to see, because it's going to make us feel negative, and we can't be negative, then we attract negative things. Meanwhile, wondering why the hell none of this works. You know, more we want to make money and manifest money, the less we manifest money, because the shadow is there and it is looming, and it will grow bigger, because if you don't look at it, it is going to get worse. And personally, it works like that. Inside, outside, society works like the same thing. We put plasters on injuries, and we do the same thing happens at school here. We have a fall, you know, are we going to put a plaster on, or are we going to also look at, why did I fall? Who's to blame? Can I be responsible for the whole process of why I fell? For example, one of the things we do is teach the skills of parkour, or parkour as they call it. Which is really getting in touch with your body at all levels. How do I jump? How do I fall? How do I roll? How do I handle my whole body? One exercise, unlike gym exercises that people love doing, pushing for one muscle by doing this and that. This is the whole body is always pushing. Our mentor, Aaron, is an amazing person in that he can demonstrate and show how it works. You know, he is not ripped like your, you know, like He-Man or any of that. This guy is inner ripped. And what's on the outside is that thing that the Buddha has, more of a stomach that can actually breathe and be part of another muscle. He will always demonstrate, when you do this, you pull yourself up on a tree branch. Ours is, of course, in nature. We don't do freestyle as in the cities and jump off buildings. We jump off rocks and trees and such, and boulders, and in and out of rivers. So what that means is that he always says, when you're pulling yourself up, you got to feel this action right down to the furthest extremity of your body, and that tiny toe right on the other side. And then you are doing it right. You don't use one muscle for this action. You use your whole body for that action. And that's why the parkour guys can move like they do. And that's why a monkey can move like it does. You know, so this is important. And again, that filters through in absolutely everything that we do. When I do something, how much responsibility am I willing to take with what I am doing? When I go to the toilet, what am I doing? Where does the toilet paper come from? You know, what is going to happen at the other end of it? Where does my water come from? So again, in my life, so 100%. And when we are balancing the male and the female side, we have awareness of what our action is, and it becomes a conscious action, not an unconscious action, because most of us are so programmed that we, and of course we've self-programmed most of the time. It's brilliant how we do that. When we drive a car, we are already self-programmed. We can do all these amazing things, multitasking, apps, I mean, whatever else, you know. And what happens when an accident happens? Oh, it was an accident. There's no such word as an accident unless we want to go absolutely null and nullify and be in the Darwinian world, and that chaos explosion that gave supposedly birth to everything. Impossible, I say. Totally impossible. That would be only one side of the brain or one side of the world created everything. And again, that's the imbalance. So, yeah, to be absolutely radically responsible, and that is almost virtually impossible, but there's always room for improvement and growth, you know. Much as a tree or a plant that looks like it's not going to make it can be given comfrey tea, can be loved, can be watered and pruned, you know, and allowed and freed to actually become more of what it wants to be. And that is usually, and actually 100% of the time, I want to live and grow and love and fulfill my purpose, you know, whether it's flipping comfortable or not. I'm going to the light. I'm going to the light. Even the deepest mycelia does go to the light and fruit, you know, and this is from the darkest, amazing places. If it wasn't for the dark, we cannot come into the light, but we have to know where our roots are down there, as you say. And if necessary, we can't reach the light, then we have to uproot and pull it right up. That process is what you're talking about. We can fall apart. So to create a container for that is important. So, and what does that mean? Like for me, in education here, it's so important. That's why it's called unschooling, deschooling, deprogramming. Creating an environment, a physical environment, the container. In our case, nature is our teacher, and natural law will inevitably, implicitly, in the smallest child, be there, because that is what they deal with. They run, they jump, they're going to fall. Now, how do I deal with that? The law of nature, gravity sucks 100% all of the time, you know. And a new agey mind or disconnect with both sides will inevitably say, oh, but I can believe that I'm not going to fall, you know, and I will not. No, sorry about that, you know. And again, what do I put into my body? Where does that come from? You know, there is cause and effect. I can put a plaster, I can go to the doctor. Doctor will give me pills. And again, it will fuel his little business. And I'll keep going back. A healer will, of course, advise and do otherwise. Mostly it's the seeds that are sown. We harvest those, the fruits of, you know, what we sow, we shall reap. Cause and effect. What is the real cause? We all look at effects and what's going on in the world and all the mess, and look at the governments and look at these people and look at the cabal and look at the WF and blah, blah, blah. What is the actual cause behind all that? Because it will always be like that if we don't uproot it. We are not willing to look at the big shadow. And it starts with our own shadow, because we are the fucking world. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
Yeah, and so at some point we'll talk about what that shadow is, and when you were talking about money, I so wanted to talk about the unholy trinity of religion, governments, and money, or religion, money, and government, you know, and that money is a control system, that it directs so much what we care about and where we direct our energy, that it is in actual fact a control system. And how can we remove ourselves from that control system is, you know, it takes courage. It takes a lot of courage to say, I'm going to do the things that I love to do rather than the things that are going to make me money, you know. And I mean, I do hear everybody's, you know, my parents' voices and everybody's voices in my head saying, but how will you live? You know, well, the living happens if you do what you're passionate about, as you and I both know, you know. So although that's been a hard one, a really hard one experience for me. That
so you know, yes. There's no romance in doing what you love doing, because you got to know that real love is tough love. That is real love. And I get a lot of feedback from people, and occasionally more so from some than others, that it is, and coming from where they are, that they think, and that's of course the inner child work that hasn't been done and processed proper, is mollycoddling and making nice and making yourself and others comfortable. It's actually all but. It's being uncomfortable. You got to crack an egg to make an omelet. You got to fall out sometimes in the nest before you learn to fly, break a couple of bones. So there is the sacrifice aspect of doing the work that few of us want to go into, because we're all supposed to be positive and lacquer and be in our happy and move towards the comfort zone. That is not how it works whatsoever. Whatsoever. For the river to move to the lowest ground, it is not a comfortable place that it chooses. It will grind through fucking rock. Okay. River is the most softest, feminine aspect, but can be the most destructive, as we've seen with floods.
Yeah.
You know, as we've seen with all these things. So to be able to learn to swim and go with the flow isn't what we think it is whatsoever. It is not comfortable. You try and learn how to go with the flow by floating on your back in a swimming pool. Yes, as you basically drown quite a number of times, you know, and then before you actually get it, and then you're like, what the hell, you know? So that is, yeah, so it's a very important, very serious process. I mean, I love humor and I love all the other parts of it, but there's some serious shit to work at. And I've been making jokes about most of these things, which a lot of people get by with. And you know, the jokey guy around is actually hurting like shit inside. I mean, there's a Robin Williams is a good example,
Yeah,
you know.
absolutely.
What is the great entertainer behind the mask? And
Mm.
masking, what all that's about. Well, hopefully we all know what that's about, you know. And then going really, really deep, and we will at times go that process also. What is good and what is bad, and what is right and what is wrong. We are so muddled up, so messed up.
Absolutely. And it really is very simple, actually, when you boil it down to the bare minimum, what is, you know, what rights are, and so therefore what is right and wrong. It really very simple, and it simplifies life to a large degree. And in the case of you know, these abandoned children inside of us that carry so much guilt and shame, actually to understand what is right and wrong helps to drop a lot of guilt and shame because
Yes.
it
Yes.
really, it's not, what is right and wrong is so simple, and it has nothing to do with culture and society. And we have been so shamed and so pushed into you know, little boxes because of what society deems right and wrong, you know. Actually going into natural law and what according to natural law is right and wrong helps to just drop all that guilt and shame, which then, and the guilt and shame is very interesting because that's the thing that keeps the facade in place,
Yeah.
you know, that facade. And though all those little emotional addictions that we engage in to keep this facade with the rest of the world so that nobody can see that hurt little me inside, which we think is such a terrible, bad person, actually, to drop the guilt and shame and just be fully and authentically oneself is a real survival need of each of us. It's so important, you know. And that part of working on a, and now I've lost my train of thought, you know.
Well,
But
exactly. You're going, yes. Yes. You're going to the root of it, you know. It is
yeah,
very beautiful to go right in there and look at what is natural law versus man-made law. It is
yeah,
very important to know what the difference is, so that you
absolutely.
know who you are and stop attracting all the crap that is
And
man-made.
yeah, because it's the guilt and shame that attracts the crap. And when we can drop that stuff, and that's where I was going, knowing what is truly right and wrong, it burns away all the bullshit, actually, and allows us to express authentically into our lives in a way that we are, in the way that I haven't been able to be before. That's what it's done for me. And so having been there myself, I can say to people, don't worry if you're in the hole, I know the way out.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, very much. Yes, yes. So that is walking the talk, very, very much so. A lot of bloody discomfort along the way. And the work is by no means ever done.
Yeah.
Sorry, folks. That is the thing. So absolutely beautifully. And then, okay, carry on. I'm going to get back my thought just now as well.
So, yeah, for me, to see the guilt and shame for what it is, it's a mechanism to keep us attached to people, to our parents when we're little, so that we can survive. And part of becoming adults, part of growing up, is dropping the guilt and shame.
Yes. So now I'll put up my hand. And I'm going to go in there, and this is how we are programmed. Okay, we put up our hands when we want to turn. Unlike rather being consciously aware of what's going on and what the other person is saying, and then waiting consciously and with awareness and feeling in the moment of when is the appropriate time to come in. Like there, I've just like jumped in, and that was inappropriate, but look what that thing does, it's quite invasive.
Sure.
So yeah. So that work again, and how does that translate into action in my life when I'm doing that work and seeing what the inner child and how I'm being tripped up by conditioning and what others say is right and wrong, and giving authority, of course, another natural law, huge principle of false belief and dangerous belief in authority outside of ourselves and or in other men and women and institutions and all those things. And like just waking the fuck up and remembering there's only one authority and no man or woman or institution, government, teacher, guru is it at all. And that is very hard pill for people to swallow, I'm God. I get in my spiritual work. I'm God. I create. I co-create with other men and women freely and not so freely because I'm so programmed and I have all these issues I haven't looked at and where therefore I will keep experiencing the same shit. As opposed to aligning, and here comes the manifestation. You've also used that word. And people often ask me, how do you manifest so brilliantly all the things in your life that just keep coming? Which I don't do with money, by the way, although money is always there when required, enough, never too much, because it's not a greedy thing for me at all. It's not my main thing, but it does help, like putting in fuel in my car. It is aligning with God, with absolutely no uncertainty, and it is uncomfortable at times, and that passion does go pear-shaped at times, and it does land me up in shit. And yes, I have hurt emotionally a lot of people in my life and pushed so many buttons and can feel guilt and shame about it. But when I realign with purpose, there is the realization, seeing with real eyes, that these are all purposeful and is actually mutually beneficial to both parties, for example, involved. Same with my own children and other children. There will be times we stumble and fall, but all of that, when we learn to pick ourselves up, that is actually what it's about. Never mind the falling. My daughter's a horse rider. I've ridden horses many times and been chucked off. Hey, it's not fun. Okay, and the bigger we are, the more we get stuck into our safety things, and my inner child starts to know what it's about. I don't have that lovely kind of virgin mind anymore and have kind of a beginner's luck thing going on. I know what can happen when I fall off, and it's fucking sore, and I don't want to get hurt again. And will I get back on if I fall off again? Well, I'll just say, no ways, this is not for me. What will I do? My daughter keeps getting back on and on and on. And she is one of the best horse riders, and not in a competition sense. She does compete. I have my opinions about all these things. And the first place is ever so elusive because something happens. The horse this, she's done that. She is learning so much in that process. And when we drop exactly that thing, the guilt conscious thing about it, because that's really about caring too much about what others think instead of actually not giving a shit what they think, but caring about what they think. Not about me, but what is going on in their minds, Not about me. I don't care what others think of me. I care what they think and
Yes.
about themselves. That is part of the work, and allowing and to get the tools and to share the tools for that. That is the teaching, so that we can get back into what is real and what is not.
Yeah, absolutely. And just to reiterate and wrap up there, when you talk about people asking you how you manifest stuff, my experience has been that I still don't know. I can tell you I've done three things. I've cleared up my relationship with myself, and that's kind of cleared up my relationship with other people. And I've worked quite hard, I think, to figure out what the divine purpose is for my life, and I've aligned myself with that. And then it's just happened. And it wasn't like an intentional thing. I'm going to manifest this, I aligned those things and it just kept going. So that's kind of what I think is when we align with divine intention, then there's then things just happen. We don't even have to manifest them. They just freaking happen,
Then all the good things happen and you will be looked after. You are looked after. Nature is always looked after. It doesn't matter when I'm in it, if I'm in it or not.
Yeah. And then difficulties come up. And there is and so just quickly we also touch on the fact that we are actually in a spiritual war. And when we align with divine intention, often obstacles come up, and that is a natural law. Actually, if you're going to say this is my intention, you're going to get all the things that are going to rub the rough edges off. Are you going to hold to this intention? Is it really your intention? So
how strong can I be? Again, the horse, Really, riding a horse is not the technique and the skill. Yes, that is the action. The real primary source of how we ride a horse and be with any animal and plant and each other really is consciousness and how I am aligned with divinity, source, because that is what that is what any animal and plant, they are in a way more infinitely connected vibe. They don't have the ego disconnect that humans have been programmed into, thinking we are something that we're not. They don't have that part. So beautifully aligned. So when I align with it, I'm aligned with the horse I'm riding. I'm aligned with the dog I'm walking. I'm aligned with the plant that I'm tending. All of these things, and the job that I'm doing, and the bicycle I'm riding, and the walk I'm talking. I align, and everything that must be there will come to you. I forage a lot of wild things, and it's beautiful that the more I live on the land and live from the land and in the land, and the less I go to anything that's fabricated and mass produced, and not with love, but of course, those things are with greed. Money is the first thing involved. How do I package it? How do I sell it? How do I lie to people so that they can just buy it and come for more, and all the crap I put in it to preserve it for that process? The more I live with the free food that is what nature is, when we open our freaking eyes and our bodies to it, the more they come and are just there. And it is hard for people to see it when they come and look around the food garden and the food forest and the messiness, that everything they're walking on under their very soul, souls, SOULSSOLES, both relevant, that
Nico,
it is food.
Yes, we're running out of time. So I think that's a beautiful,
beautiful
place to wrap up.